The situation in Afghanistan has continued to dominate the news cycle. The framing of it is something that enrages me quite deeply. And you just see it from every section of the press. Bob Menendez, senator from New Jersey, member of Biden's own party, calling for an investigation into the withdrawal. These displays of American might not being so mighty is really what is getting people's goats. Let's start with H.R. McMaster, former national security advisor to Donald Trump. He got a lot of treatment as a media darling in the Trump era and post-Trump era once he was fired for criticizing Trump after he no longer was employed by him. Kind of easy. He would do a lot of that criticism on their airways for publicity and to help his own career. And let's be clear, most of that criticism boiled down to he's not hawkish enough on North Korea. He's not hawkish enough on Iran. He was openly against reentering a peace deal with Iran. So he's this media creation as an acceptable, if not heroic figure who stood up to Trump by getting fired.
Well, it's the way we valorize military figures in general. Also,
he was their he was a twofer, right? We could valorize a military general and also criticize the Trump administration in the same breath. So now he's on CNN, baselessly speculating about these suicide bombs carried out by ISIS-K. They claimed responsibility, killing over 100 people, mostly Afghan civilians, and 13 American service members, wounding many more. It's a tragedy because it's a war, and war is unconscionable and a tragedy. And it's well known that, by the way, ISIS-K and the Taliban who's currently in part working with the United States to get Americans out of the country, because they don't want their rule challenged any longer. Taliban's like, get out of here, United States. We want to fully take over. And ISIS-K is kind of an upstart, smaller group that wants to express their own opposition and wants to be an alternative to the Taliban. They're a different type of group. They're younger. They're more militant. The Taliban has a little bit more money, more entrenched. Obviously, they've been around for many years. We know about that. So McMaster, though, has a different unsubstantiated theory. He decided to remix the bin Laden's working with Saddam theory from the start of the Iraq War. Let's hear what he opined without evidence on cable TV yesterday.
This is what we're facing. And this is what happens when you surrender to jihadist terrorists. And I think, Jim, what's important about this, you may hear this is ISIS-K or whatever, but these terrorist organizations exist in an ecosystem along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border and now all across Afghanistan, in which they share people and resources. Siraj Haqqani is the military commander of the Taliban, and he's a central figure in al-Qaeda. This is a myth, right, that the Taliban is separate from al-Qaeda and these other groups. I would not be surprised in any way if ISIS-K was used, their Kabul attack network was used as a cutout for the Taliban, so they can humiliate us on the way out and still continue to play us, because I don't think they think we're serious people, Jim. I mean, so our weakness is encourage them to be emboldened, and of course they're going to have, as you mentioned, a safe haven support base, access to resources that will make them extraordinarily dangerous, as well has the ability now to say, hey, look, we're winning, right? We've established the Islamic Emirate in Khorasan. Come to our cause.
Much like that, ISIS-K is a cutout. Just two headlines from last year. Military Times on February 27, 2020. ISIS loses more than half of its fighters from airstrikes, from U.S. airstrikes and Taliban ground operations. WAPO, Washington Post, October 22nd, 2020. The U.S. is secretly helping the Taliban fight ISIS with air power. So, anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't know. They exist in an ecosystem, which means something.
I mean, that guy's McMaster just a mendacious liar and fabricator of truth, and we talk about CNN, that is state-controlled television, basically. What a disgraceful segment by Jim Sciutto there.
Wait for the end, because he asked a question that's kind of cut off, but the framing is unbelievable. But I just, before we go back to the clip, these terrorist organizations exist in an ecosystem. Is a rivalry an ecosystem? It's not symbiotic. They are fighting one another, and it's just an ecosystem is code for they're all Muslim, right?
They exist in an ecosystem we've been flooding with guns for decades now.
Yeah, that's some kind of ecosystem. Let's continue.
In Khorasan, come to our cause, much like ISIS did when they recruited 30,000 fighters at the drop of a hat, right? Once they took over territory the size of Britain in Iraq and in Syria. And then, of course, we had to go back, Jim. So now what I would just ask, what was it worth it, really? You know, what would be a better outcome? You know, a sustained commitment of a few thousand U.S. troops who were continuing to enable the Afghans to bear the brunt of this fight, or this catastrophe that we're seeing now, right? We had this end the endless wars narrative, Jim. But hey, guess what? You know, this is an endless jihad that the enemies of all civilized people are waging against us. And if we don't acknowledge that, we're putting ourselves at an extraordinarily high risk.
And one lesson of recent years with terrorism is that victory equals recruiting. When ISIS took over portions of Iraq.
That is not the lesson. You know what creates recruiting? The United States murdering your family. That's what creates terrorism. That's what creates recruiting.
Was ISIS-K there at the start of the U.S. occupation?
Yeah. You want to talk about recent history, Jim Sciutto? Let's talk about the fuller context of the history and the war on terror. Why was ISIS created in Syria? Why did ISIS become what it is today? Right? It's because of our own destabilizing of the region. It's because of our war in Iraq.
It's because of our contributions to the ecosystem.
Yeah, right, exactly. Which we allowed to thrive endlessly by making it fertile ground for terrorism by flooding it with guns. It's essentially a great way to crop those things up and to make it
collapse it into a civilization of Muslim versus Christianity thing.
Right. So, like, there are so many things that he said there. Humiliate us, our weakness, right? They don't think we're serious people, probably because they know that we just bomb and abandon and don't know the differences between two rival groups, one as an established militant guerrilla army force in the Taliban, and one as an upstart, one offshoot, which was founded by people who left the Afghan and Pakistan Taliban and started this more poorer to middle class guerrilla force that wants to compete for influence in the region. And they've been fighting over territory, specifically in northern Afghanistan, on a regular basis. That's probably why they don't necessarily see us as serious as we kill with abandon in the region. They know we don't know anything. We're rubes that walk around and hand out cash and set up gyms in the Afghan government and give and flood the country with guns and bombs and technology that they can use. Like, why would they respect us? And they're certainly not going to respect us when we murder more people that they know. Like, that's what you learn from recent years, is that their own victory equals recruiting.
I mean, it's a propaganda line. He didn't actually learn that. They're lying.
Yeah.
Jim Sciutto is the type of guy who blamed politics on not letting the military win this. He's a threat to democracy, in my opinion.
So this is what we're hearing, and we're going to do the same thing over and over again. If you're a Muslim group, you must be tied to the other Muslim group. And that's how we're going to conduct our foreign policy, based on vague, amorphous, just constant Islamophobia that sees these brown people as savages. You heard him say it there, civilized. They're a threat to the rest of the civilized world. And the only way they're going to learn their lesson is if we kill a few more. If we kill a lot more, maybe. And that's the case for a sustained presence. And it's being aided and abetted again by CNN, again by our media. We're doing this again. And the only thing that's saving us right now is literally like Biden just sticking to his guns. So thankfully that's happening. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but that's the reality, because the forces right now are aligned.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.